The Council of Galaxies had stood for over 12 million years, governing the civilized species across 17 different galaxies. Their great station, Nexus Prime, floated in the void between the Milky Way and Andromeda, a testament to peaceful cooperation among thousands of different alien civilizations. The massive structure, larger than most planets, housed representatives from every known sapient species in the known universe. Every species, that is, except one. Commander Zixtal of the Hegemony Battle Fleet had always wondered about the mysterious entry in the Galactic Registry. Listed under Sol System Third Planet was a single line that had puzzled military strategists for centuries. Species classification, human. Status, prohibited from galactic warfare. Threat level, absolute. The spider-like arachnoid commander had seen threat levels before. The crystalline Vorthon were rated high due to their ability to manipulate matter at the molecular level. The gaseous nebula swimmers were severe because they could exist in the vacuum of space without protection. But absolute was a classification that didn't officially exist in any manual. Today, however, Zixtal would finally get answers. The Council had summoned her to review classified historical records, something that happened perhaps once every 1,000 years. As she skittered through the corridors of Nexus Prime on her 8 legs, her compound eyes noticed the unusual activity around the archive vaults. The archive keeper, an ancient being known only as the Chronicler, emerged from the quantum-sealed vaults carrying a data crystal that seemed to bend light around itself. The Chronicler's species was unknown, possibly one of the first ones who had built the original council. Its form shifted constantly, sometimes appearing as pure energy, other times as a vaguely humanoid shadow. "Commander Zixtal," the Chronicler's voice echoed from everywhere and nowhere. "You have been selected to review the human incident files. What you learn today must never leave this chamber, as per Galactic Protocol 77 Alpha." They entered a shielded room where reality itself seemed more stable. The walls were lined with quantum dampeners that prevented any form of recording or transmission. The Chronicler activated the data crystal, and holographic displays filled the air around them. "Tell me, Commander," the Chronicler began, "what do you know about the concept of total war?" Zixtal's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "Standard military doctrine involving complete mobilization of resources and civilian populations in support of military objectives. That is the textbook definition used by civilized species. Humans, however, created something far more terrifying." The first hologram materialized, showing a blue-green planet orbiting a yellow star. Earth, as they call their homeworld, has a unique characteristic among all known worlds supporting intelligent life. The planet rotated slowly in the display, and Zixtal could see the continents, oceans, and what appeared to be a thriving biosphere. It looked remarkably peaceful. "I fail to see what makes this world special," Zixtal admitted. "Observe the historical timeline." The display shifted to show the planet's surface over different time periods. In the span of just 10,000 years, this species went from primitive agriculture to splitting the atom. In another century, they achieved spaceflight. But here is what makes them unique among all known sapients. The display now showed what appeared to be territorial boundaries across the planet's surface, constantly shifting and changing. Most species achieve sapience, develop basic civilization, and then expand to the stars. Humans did something else first. They perfected the art of war. Images began flowing past them now, showing conflicts that spanned continents. Zixtal saw primitive weapons giving way to increasingly sophisticated instruments of destruction, but what caught her attention was the scale. By their measure of years, humans fought in over 14,000 separate wars during their pre-space era. They created professional armies, military academies, and entire philosophies dedicated to combat. While our species were learning to cooperate and share resources, humans were learning to destroy each other more efficiently. The chronicler's form shifted to something resembling concern. But that alone would not warrant their prohibition from galactic warfare. Many species have violent histories. What makes humans truly dangerous is how they think about conflict. A new series of images appeared, showing massive industrial complexes. When humans engage in total war, they don't simply mobilize their armies. They transform their entire civilization into a weapon. During what they call their Second World War, one human nation was producing a complete military aircraft every 60 minutes. Another was manufacturing ammunition at a rate that exceeded the total annual output of most galactic civilizations. Zixtal's compound eyes widened. The industrial capacity being displayed was staggering, especially for a pre-space civilization. But surely their primitive technology would be no match for modern galactic forces, she asked. The chronicler's silence was unsettling. Then it spoke in what might have been the equivalent of a whisper. That assumption led to the most costly mistake in galactic history. Commander, are you familiar with the Kresh Empire? Of course she was. Every military officer knew about the Kresh. They had been the dominant force in the local galactic cluster for over 50,000 years. Their technology was centuries ahead of most other species. Their military doctrine was flawless, and their expansion had seemed unstoppable. Past tense is appropriate, the chronicler confirmed. The Kresh no longer exist as an empire. They encountered humans during what the records list as First Contact Incident Omega-7. The Kresh, believing humans to be a primitive species suitable for conquest or integration, issued standard territorial demands. The display now showed recordings from Kresh archives. Massive warships, each one the size of a human city, approaching Earth's solar system. Their technology was indeed impressive by any reasonable standard. Energy weapons that could crack planets, shields that could deflect entire asteroid fields, and faster-than-light capability that allowed them to strike anywhere in the galaxy within days. The humans' initial response was exactly what the Kresh expected. They attempted to negotiate, offered tribute, and requested peaceful contact, standard behavior from a primitive species facing overwhelmingly superior force. Zixtal watched as human representatives, looking tiny and fragile compared to the massive Kresh warriors, attempted diplomatic contact. It all seemed perfectly normal for a first contact scenario between an advanced and primitive civilization. What the Kresh failed to understand was that humans view negotiation not as surrender, but as intelligence gathering. While their diplomats talked, their military was analyzing Kresh technology, tactics, and weaknesses. The scene shifted to show human industrial facilities that had seemingly appeared overnight. Within 6 months of first contact, humans had reverse-engineered Kresh shield technology. Within a year, they had improved upon it. But that was not the dangerous part. Now the display showed something that made Zixtal's exoskeleton tingle with unease. The peaceful blue planet was transforming before her eyes. Massive construction projects appeared on every continent. The orbital space around Earth filled with defensive platforms and manufacturing stations. Humans possess something that no other known species has developed: the ability to completely restructure their society for warfare in a matter of months. When they realized the Kresh intended conquest, every human on the planet became part of their war machine. The chronicler manipulated the display to show the scope of human mobilization. Universities became weapons research facilities. Entertainment companies began producing propaganda and training materials. Manufacturers that had been making consumer goods retooled to produce military hardware. Most remarkably, they did this voluntarily. Voluntarily? Zixtal's translator struggled with the concept. No government forced this transformation. No military authority commanded it. The humans simply decided collectively that their independence was worth any sacrifice. They turned their entire planet into a fortress and their entire population into soldiers. The display now showed the Kresh fleet advancing on the Sol system. Thousands of massive warships, enough firepower to sterilize dozens of worlds. Against them, a few hundred hastily constructed human vessels that looked primitive by comparison. The Kresh expected victory within days. Their ships were larger, their weapons more powerful, their shields stronger. By every tactical assessment, humans should have been completely outmatched. The battle recordings began to play, and Zixtal watched in fascination. The human ships were indeed outgunned, but they weren't fighting like any species she had ever studied. Instead of engaging in traditional ship-to-ship combat, they seemed to be fighting like a swarm of insects. Humans had studied every recorded battle in galactic history. They learned that most species fight with honor, following established conventions of warfare. Humans abandoned all such concepts. They used suicide attacks, deception, and tactics that violated every accepted rule of civilized combat. On the display, human ships were ramming Kresh vessels, using themselves as guided weapons. Others were employing stealth technology to attack from impossible angles. Most disturbing of all, they seemed to anticipate Kresh tactics before they were executed. How could a primitive species predict the movements of experienced military forces? Zixtal asked. Because humans had been fighting each other for millennia using those same tactics. Every strategy the Kresh employed, humans had already seen, used, and developed counters for during their own wars. The Kresh were fighting with textbook precision against an opponent who had written several textbooks on defeating textbook precision. The battle recordings showed the tide turning with shocking speed. Human vessels, though smaller and apparently less advanced, began overwhelming the Kresh through sheer tactical innovation and apparent disregard for their own losses. But surely the Kresh technological advantage would eventually prevail? The chronicler's form darkened. That assumption led to the Kresh Empire's greatest mistake. They decided to demonstrate their superior firepower by destroying one of humanity's cities from orbit. The display showed a Kresh dreadnought positioning itself above Earth and charging its planetary bombardment weapons. The energy beam that lanced down from orbit was indeed impressive, capable of reducing several square kilometers to molten slag. The targeted city was eliminated in seconds. The Kresh then broadcast demands for immediate surrender, believing they had demonstrated the futility of resistance. Zixtal watched as the human response began to unfold. Instead of surrender, something else happened. The industrial transformation that had been impressive before suddenly accelerated into something that defied belief. The destruction of one of their cities triggered what humans call total war mentality. Every human on the planet now considered the Kresh to be an existential threat, requiring complete elimination. Not defeat, not surrender. Complete elimination. The display now showed human production facilities working at impossible pace. Space elevators that had taken months to build were being completed in weeks. Shipyards were producing vessels at a rate that seemed to violate physics. How is that level of production possible? Zixtal demanded. Because humans stopped producing everything else. No entertainment, no luxury goods, no non-essential items of any kind. Every factory, every worker, every resource was dedicated to building weapons and ships. They were literally consuming their own civilization to fuel their war machine. The space around Earth was now crowded with defensive platforms, manufacturing stations, and ships. Lots of ships. Far more than should have been possible for a single planet to produce in such a short time. The Kresh, seeing this buildup, decided to end the conflict quickly by attacking Earth directly with their entire fleet. The final battle recordings began to play, and Zixtal found herself watching something that shouldn't have been possible. The Kresh fleet, thousands of ships strong, was approaching Earth with overwhelming force. Against them, the humans had assembled a defensive fleet that was somehow larger than the attacking force. In less than 2 years, humans had built more warships than most galactic civilizations possess after millennia of development. But quantity was not their only advantage. The human vessels in the recording were clearly more advanced than the ships from earlier battles. They moved faster, hit harder, and demonstrated technology that seemed to have advanced years in the span of months. Humans possess an ability that no other species has demonstrated: rapid technological evolution under pressure. While most species require decades to develop new technologies, humans compressed their development cycles to weeks. They were improving their weapons and defenses faster than the Kresh could analyze and counter them. The battle itself was unlike anything in galactic history. The Kresh, fighting with traditional tactics and established technology, found themselves overwhelmed by an opponent that seemed to evolve in real time. The Kresh Empire's final transmission was a warning to all galactic civilizations, the chronicler said as the display faded. They declared humans to be the most dangerous species in the known universe and recommended permanent quarantine. Zixtal sat in stunned silence for several minutes, processing what she had learned. Finally, she spoke. What happened to the Kresh survivors? There were no survivors. Humans do not accept conditional surrender during existential conflicts. They pursued every fleeing Kresh ship to every colony world and eliminated the entire species. The weight of that statement settled on Zixtal like a physical force, an entire galactic empire wiped from existence by a species that had barely achieved spaceflight. And humans? What happened to them? They returned to their planet, dismantled their war machine, and went back to their previous activities as if nothing had occurred. But they kept all the technology they had developed, and they kept building ships. The chronicler activated a final display, showing the Sol system as it existed now. The single planet had become the center of an industrial complex that spanned the entire solar system. Massive structures orbited every planet and asteroid, clearly designed for ship construction and resource processing. This is why humans are prohibited from galactic warfare, Commander. Not because they are evil or aggressive, but because they approach conflict in a way that threatens the existence of civilization itself. When humans fight, they don't seek victory. They seek the complete elimination of their enemies, and they will sacrifice everything to achieve it. Zixtal stared at the displays, finally understanding why the human entry in the registry carried a threat level that officially didn't exist. Has any species attempted contact since the Kresh incident? Several. All peaceful approaches have been welcomed. Humans, when not threatened, are remarkably cooperative and innovative, but any species that has approached with hostile intent has simply disappeared. The chronicler began deactivating the displays. The Council maintains the prohibition not to protect the galaxy from humans, but to protect potential aggressors from making the same mistake as the Kresh. Humans have proven they can coexist peacefully with any species that approaches them with peaceful intent. As they prepared to leave the archive chamber, Zixtal had one final question. What would happen if humans were allowed to participate in galactic warfare? The chronicler paused at the threshold. Based on their historical patterns, they would probably end all galactic warfare permanently by eliminating any species aggressive enough to start one. The Council decided that maintaining current conflicts was preferable to risking that particular solution. The archive chamber sealed behind them, and Zixtal returned to her duties with a new understanding of why some entries in the Galactic Registry were classified beyond normal security protocols. In the vast cosmos filled with thousands of alien civilizations, humans remained unique. The only species considered too dangerous to fight, not because of their malice, but because of their competence. 3 months after her visit to the archives, Commander Zixtal found herself facing a crisis that would test everything she had learned about humans. The emergency alert had reached Nexus Prime during the 3rd shift, when most of the station was in its rest cycle. A distress signal from the Outer Rim had triggered automatic defense protocols across 17 galaxies. The Devourer swarm had returned. Zixtal's 8 legs clicked rapidly against the deck plating as she hurried toward the Council emergency chamber. The Devourers were the stuff of galactic nightmares, a species that consumed entire star systems, converting all matter into more of themselves. They had last appeared over 1,000,000 years ago, and it had taken the combined might of 47 different civilizations to drive them into the void between galaxies. The emergency chamber was already crowded with representatives from major military powers when Zixtal arrived. The crystalline Vorthon were there, their forms refracting the chamber's lighting into rainbow patterns. The massive Titan-class beings occupied the center spaces, their rock-like bodies seemingly carved from living mountains. Even the energy-based plasma collective had manifested physical forms for the emergency session. At the center of the chamber, High Admiral Korth An of the Centauri Defense Corps was updating the holographic displays. The bat-like being's leathery wings twitched with agitation as he manipulated the controls with his clawed hands. "The swarm has emerged from dark space in Sector 7G," his voice echoed through the universal translators. "Initial reports indicate a force approximately 3 times larger than during their last incursion. They've already consumed the Kepler system and are moving toward inhabited space at maximum velocity." The tactical display showed a disturbing sight. Where star systems had existed just days before, there was now only empty space and an expanding cloud of metallic particles that gleamed with unnatural light. The swarm consumed everything: planets, moons, asteroids, even the stars themselves, converting matter into their biomechanical ships. "Current projections show them reaching the heavily populated Arcturian sector within 47 standard time units," Korth An continued. "We need to mobilize every available fleet immediately." General Vex Nara of the Hegemony War Council raised a tentacle. "Our combined fleets numbered in the hundreds of thousands during the last swarm war. We lost 60% of our forces driving them back. This time they're stronger, and our forces are scattered across multiple ongoing conflicts." The mood in the chamber was growing darker by the moment. The mathematics of the situation were brutal and simple. The last time, it had taken overwhelming numbers and the element of surprise to defeat the Devourers. This time, they had neither advantage. "What about the Omega Protocol?" suggested Admiral Thisara of the Nebula Riders. "Surely this qualifies as a galactic extinction event." The Omega Protocol was theoretical, never used. It involved the complete mobilization of every space-capable civilization in the known galaxies, along with the deployment of weapons that were normally prohibited by galactic law. Planet crackers, star killers, and reality distortion weapons that could tear holes in space itself. "Even with Omega Protocol, our analysts estimate a 30% chance of victory," Korth An replied. "And that's assuming we can coordinate the mobilization before the swarm reaches critical mass." Zixtal found herself speaking before she had fully thought through the implications. "What about the humans?" The chamber fell silent. Every being in the room turned to look at her with whatever visual organs their species possessed. The suggestion was so unprecedented that it took several seconds for anyone to respond. "The humans are prohibited from galactic warfare," High Admiral Korth An stated flatly. "Galactic Code 77 Alpha explicitly forbids their involvement in any military conflict." "But this isn't warfare," Zixtal argued, her compound eyes scanning the room. "This is survival. The Devourers don't negotiate or surrender. They don't have territory or politics. They simply consume. This is exactly the kind of existential threat that triggers human total war protocols." General Vex Nara's tentacles writhed with agitation. "Are you seriously suggesting we lift a ban that has been in place for over 3,000 years? The humans were quarantined for good reasons." "Yes," Zixtal replied firmly, "because I've seen what those reasons were. The humans weren't banned because they're evil or uncontrollable. They were banned because they're too effective at eliminating threats completely." She activated her personal display unit and projected images from the chronicler's archives, carefully edited to remove the most classified information. The Kresh Empire had technology centuries ahead of human capabilities. They had overwhelming numerical superiority. They should have won easily. The images showed the brief war between humans and the Kresh, focusing on the industrial transformation that had allowed Earth to build a fleet larger than most galactic civilizations in less than 2 years. Humans don't fight wars the way we do, Zixtal explained. They don't seek tactical advantage or territorial gain. When they're threatened with extinction, they transform their entire civilization into a weapon designed for one purpose: the complete elimination of the threat. Admiral Thessara's gaseous form shimmered with uncertainty. But how could a single planet's population possibly affect a force that threatens entire galaxies? Before Zixtal could answer, a new voice entered the conversation. The chronicler materialized in the center of the chamber, its shifting form immediately commanding attention from every being present. "The commander raises a valid point," the chronicler stated. "Current projections indicate that conventional forces have insufficient probability of success against the enhanced swarm. Alternative strategies must be considered." High Admiral Corthon's wings spread wide in a gesture of authority. "The prohibition exists for the protection of galactic civilization. Humans are too dangerous to include in military operations." "More dangerous than the complete consumption of all matter in 17 galaxies?" the chronicler asked. "I have reviewed the tactical assessments. The Devourer swarm will reach critical mass within 200 standard time units. After that point, they will be effectively unstoppable by any conventional means." The chamber erupted in discussion as representatives began arguing among themselves. The crystalline Vorthon chimed in harmonic frequencies that expressed deep concern. The Titan-class beings rumbled with voices like geological events. The energy beings crackled with electrical discharges that indicated extreme agitation. Through it all, Zixtal found herself thinking about the industrial complexes she had seen orbiting every body in the Sol system. Humans had built all of that in peacetime, simply because they could. What might they accomplish if they were truly threatened? "There is another consideration," the chronicler announced, cutting through the arguments. "Humans have been observing galactic communications for over 1,000 years. They are aware of the Devourer threat." This statement brought immediate silence to the chamber. "Explain," demanded General Vexnara. "Human technology has advanced considerably since their encounter with the Kresh Empire. Their monitoring stations can intercept communications across most of the local galactic cluster. They have been tracking the swarm since it emerged from dark space." The implications were staggering. If humans had been watching galactic civilization for centuries while being officially quarantined, what else did they know? What capabilities had they developed? Admiral Thessara asked the question everyone was thinking. "What is their assessment of the situation?" The chronicler's form shifted to what might have been amusement. 3 hours ago, the Sol System defense grid activated to maximum readiness. Orbital platforms that have remained dormant for centuries are powering up. Most significantly, their deep space monitoring stations are tracking something approaching from beyond the galactic rim. "Something approaching?" Corthon demanded. "Human ships, approximately 12,000 of them, moving toward Devourer space at velocities that suggest significant advances in faster-than-light technology." The number hit the chamber like a physical blow. 12,000 ships was more than most galactic civilizations possessed in total. The fact that humans had built and deployed such a fleet without anyone knowing about it spoke to capabilities that defied comprehension. "How is it possible that we weren't aware of such a massive fleet?" Vexnara asked. "Because humans learned from their encounter with the Kresh," Zixtal realized. They've been preparing for another existential threat for over 3,000 years, not just building ships but advancing their technology and tactics. The chronicler confirmed her assessment. Human civilization appears to have spent the past 3 millennia in a state of readiness that most species reserve for active warfare. They have continued advancing their military capabilities while maintaining the appearance of peaceful development. The tactical display updated to show new information. Long-range sensors had detected the approaching human fleet, and the readings were disturbing. The ships were massive, larger than anything in current galactic databases. Their energy signature suggested technology that was centuries ahead of current galactic standards. They've been preparing for this specific threat, Zixtal continued. Humans study their enemies obsessively. If they've been monitoring galactic communications, they know everything we know about the Devourers, and they've had 3,000 years to develop countermeasures. High Admiral Corthon studied the displays with growing unease. Even if their technology is advanced, 12,000 ships cannot possibly match the swarm's numbers. Unless they're not planning to match them, the chronicler observed. Human military doctrine emphasizes force multiplication and asymmetric warfare. Quantity is less important than effectiveness. As if summoned by their discussion, a new signal appeared on the communication arrays. The universal translators struggled for a moment before resolving into clear audio. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Defense Force, broadcasting on all galactic emergency frequencies. We are aware of the Devourer incursion and are moving to intercept. We recommend all galactic forces maintain distance from Sector 7G until our operations are complete. The casual tone of the message was almost more unsettling than its content. The humans weren't asking for permission or coordination. They were simply informing everyone else to stay out of their way. General Vex Nara's tentacles writhed with agitation. The audacity is staggering. A single-planet species giving operational orders to galactic civilization. A single-planet species that just deployed 12,000 advanced warships without anyone noticing, Zixtal corrected. Maybe we should listen to them. The debate that followed was intense and brief. The mathematics of the situation were undeniable. Conventional forces had minimal chance of success against the enhanced swarm. The humans had already deployed and were moving to engage. The choice was between allowing them to proceed or trying to stop them, which would require fighting both humans and Devourers simultaneously. The vote was surprisingly unanimous. For the first time in galactic history, the prohibition against human military involvement was temporarily suspended. Admiral Chen's response to the official notification was typically direct. Understood. We'll handle the Devourers. Recommend you use this time to upgrade your defensive systems. This won't be the last existential threat the galaxy faces. The human fleet reached Devourer space 18 hours later, and long-range sensors began transmitting data that would change galactic military thinking forever. The humans weren't engaging in traditional ship-to-ship combat. Instead, they were deploying weapons that seemed to violate several fundamental laws of physics. Entire sections of the Devourer swarm simply disappeared. Not destroyed in the conventional sense, but erased from existence as if they had never been there. Other human weapons converted Devourer biomechanical matter back into basic elements, reversing the consumption process that made the swarm so dangerous. Most remarkably, the humans were capturing Devourer technology and analyzing it in real time. Within hours of first contact, they were fielding countermeasures specifically designed to neutralize swarm advantages. How are they developing counters so quickly? Admiral Thysiara asked. The chronicler had been monitoring human communications, something that was apparently possible now that they were broadcasting openly. They appear to have been studying Devourer technology for centuries, using samples recovered from previous incursions. They have already identified the fundamental weaknesses in swarm biomechanics. The battle, if it could be called that, lasted less than 72 hours. When it was over, the Devourer swarm had been completely eliminated. Not driven back into dark space, not reduced to manageable numbers, but utterly destroyed. The consumed star systems remained empty, but the threat that had terrorized galactic civilization for millions of years was gone. The human fleet began collecting samples and data from the battle zone, apparently intent on learning everything possible about their defeated enemies. When galactic forces finally approached the area, they found Admiral Chen's flagship waiting for them. "The immediate threat has been neutralized," her message was broadcast to all approaching ships. "We're forwarding complete tactical data to your fleets. Use it to upgrade your defensive capabilities. We'll be returning to Sol system, but we'll maintain monitoring stations in case any swarm remnants emerge from deep space." As the human fleet departed, Zixtal found herself staring at the tactical displays that showed where the battle had occurred. The efficiency had been breathtaking. An existential threat that should have required the combined might of galactic civilization had been eliminated by a single species in less than 3 days. "Now, do you understand why humans are prohibited from galactic warfare?" the chronicler asked. Zixtal's compound eyes focused on the empty space where the swarm had been. "Because they don't just win wars, they end them permanently. And because they've had 3,000 years to prepare for threats we can't even imagine yet," the chronicler added. "The question now is what other preparations they've made and what other threats they've identified that we haven't." As Nexus Prime received the human tactical data, military analysts across 17 galaxies began realizing that their understanding of warfare had just become obsolete. The humans hadn't just defeated the Devourers. They had demonstrated capabilities that suggested they were no longer the primitive species that had been quarantined millennia ago. They had become something far more advanced and far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. And they were still neighbors in the same galaxy. 6 months had passed since the Devourer incident, and the galaxy had not been the same. The tactical data that humans had shared freely with all galactic civilizations had revolutionized military thinking across 17 different galaxies. Technologies that had seemed impossible were now being studied and slowly understood by the greatest minds in known space. Commander Zixtal had been promoted to Supreme Military Analyst for the Council, a position that had been created specifically to study the implications of human capabilities. Her new office aboard Nexus Prime overlooked the diplomatic quarters where something unprecedented was taking place. Humanity's first official embassy to galactic civilization. The embassy itself was modest by galactic standards, but its presence represented a fundamental shift in how the galaxy viewed Earth's inhabitants. After millennia of quarantine, humans were finally being recognized as a galactic power, not just because of their military capabilities, but because their technological advancement had reached a point where isolation was no longer practical or possible. Ambassador Elena Vasquez was the first human to officially set foot on Nexus Prime, and her arrival had caused quite a stir among the diplomatic corps. She was smaller than most galactic species, as humans tended to be, but her presence seemed to fill any room she entered. Zixtal had been assigned as her military liaison, a position that had led to several fascinating conversations. "Your people are curious about us," Elena had said during their first meeting. "I understand that. We've been curious about all of you for quite some time as well." Today's meeting was different, however. Intelligence reports from across the galaxy had been arriving for weeks, all describing the same phenomenon. Human activity in deep space had increased dramatically. Ships were being detected in regions where no galactic civilization had ever ventured, conducting operations that appeared to be exploratory in nature. "Ambassador!" Zixtal began as they settled into the conference room that had been specially configured for interspecies meetings. Our monitoring stations have detected human vessels in the Andromeda Galaxy, the Large Magellanic Cloud, and at least 12 other galactic clusters. The scope of your exploration activities seems to extend far beyond what we previously understood. Elena smiled, an expression that Zixtal had learned to interpret as either friendliness or amusement. With humans, it could be difficult to tell the difference. "We've been busy," Elena admitted. "The Devourer incident reminded us that threats to galactic civilization can come from anywhere. We've been conducting surveys to identify potential dangers before they become actual problems." Surveys? Zixtal's translator struggled with the casual tone Elena used for what appeared to be massive interstellar operations. "Our estimates suggest you would need hundreds of thousands of ships to cover the regions where your vessels have been detected." "That's about right," Elena confirmed, as if discussing something as mundane as weather patterns. "We've been building exploration fleets for the past few centuries. It seemed like a reasonable precaution." The implications were staggering. Hundreds of thousands of ships meant that humanity's total fleet size was comparable to the combined navies of every known galactic civilization. The fact that they had built such a massive force without anyone knowing about it spoke to industrial capabilities that defied comprehension. "What exactly are you looking for?" Zixtal asked. Elena's expression became more serious. "Threats like the Devourers. Our analysis suggests that they were probably not unique. The universe is vast, and evolution has had billions of years to produce species with aggressive expansion patterns. We want to identify and catalog potential dangers before they become immediate problems." A soft chime indicated that the chronicler was requesting access to the meeting. The ancient being materialized in the room with its usual display of shifting energy patterns. "Ambassador Vasquez," the chronicler's voice carried what might have been approval. "Your species' approach to threat assessment has proven remarkably thorough. Our own sensors have detected some of your discoveries." Elena nodded respectfully to the chronicler. "We've been sharing our findings with the Council as we encounter them. The preliminary reports should have reached your archives by now." Zixtal accessed her datapad and began reviewing the files that the chronicler was transmitting. What she read made her compound eyes widen in alarm. The humans hadn't just been exploring random regions of space. They had been systematically investigating dark matter formations, energy anomalies, and gravitational distortions that suggested the presence of unknown civilizations or phenomena. "You've identified 17 potential threats comparable to the Devourer swarm?" Zixtal asked, struggling to keep her voice steady. 19, actually," Elena corrected. "We've been tracking something in the void beyond that appears to be significantly larger than the Devourers were. And we've detected artificial structures in several galaxies that don't match any known architectural patterns." The chronicler's form shifted to what Zixtal had learned to interpret as intense interest. "Please elaborate on these artificial structures." Elena activated a holographic display that filled the center of the room. The images that appeared showed constructs that dwarfed anything in galactic civilization. Massive rings that encircled entire stars, spherical structures large enough to contain solar systems, and geometric patterns that extended across light years of space. These appear to be the remnants of civilizations that achieved technological advancement far beyond current galactic capabilities. Elena explained. "Most of them seem to be abandoned, but our deep space sensors have detected energy signatures that suggest some may still be active." Zixtal stared at the images in fascination and growing unease. If such civilizations existed, why had galactic civilization never encountered them? Where were the beings who had built structures on such an impossibly vast scale? "Our preliminary investigations suggest that most of these civilizations either transcended physical existence or were eliminated by existential threats similar to the Devourers," Elena continued. "The pattern appears to repeat throughout cosmic history. Civilizations arise, achieve great technological advancement, and then either evolve beyond physical form or are destroyed by cosmic-scale dangers. The implications were sobering. Galactic civilization, for all its diversity and technological achievement, might be just another phase in a cycle that had repeated countless times throughout cosmic history. "What do humans plan to do with this information?" the chronicler asked. Elena's expression became determined. "We plan to break the cycle. Every extinct civilization we've studied was eventually overwhelmed by threats they hadn't anticipated or prepared for adequately. We intend to be different." She manipulated the display to show new images, these depicting human operations throughout known space. Monitoring stations hidden in dark matter formations, research facilities investigating cosmic anomalies, and defensive installations positioned at strategic points throughout multiple galaxies. "We've been building an early warning network that spans most of the known universe," Elena explained. "If another existential threat emerges, we'll know about it long before it reaches inhabited space, and we'll be prepared to deal with it." Zixtal realized she was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. Humans weren't just defending their own territory or interests. They were appointing themselves as guardians of cosmic civilization, taking responsibility for threats that might not emerge for millions of years. "The scope of what you're describing would require resources beyond what any single planet could provide," Zixtal observed. Elena smiled again, and this time, Zixtal was certain it indicated amusement. "Who said we're limited to a single planet?" The holographic display shifted to show the Sol system as it existed now, and Zixtal gasped at what she saw. Every planet had been transformed into an industrial complex. Mars was covered with manufacturing facilities. The gas giants had been surrounded by orbital platforms that harvested resources directly from their atmospheres. Even the asteroid belt had been converted into a vast network of mining and construction operations. "We've been terraforming and industrializing suitable worlds throughout the local galactic region for the past 1,000 years, Elena explained casually. "Current estimates suggest we have productive facilities in over 2,000 star systems." The numbers were beyond anything Zixtal had imagined possible. 2,000 industrial systems would provide resource access that exceeded the total capacity of current galactic civilization. It explained how humans had been able to build massive fleets and monitoring networks without anyone noticing. "But surely other species would have detected such expansion?" Zixtal asked. "Not if we were careful about which systems we chose," Elena replied. "We focused on regions that were either uninhabited or contained resources that other species weren't interested in. Most galactic civilizations prefer planets with existing atmospheres and established ecosystems. We learned to build our own." The chronicler's form brightened with what might have been admiration. "Your species has achieved something remarkable. You have expanded to galactic scale while remaining essentially invisible to galactic civilization." "It seemed like the safest approach," Elena admitted. "We learned from the Kresh incident that being too visible could provoke unnecessary conflicts. Better to develop our capabilities quietly and reveal them only when necessary." A new alert chimed through the station's communication system, indicating an urgent message from the Council's Deep Space Monitoring Network. The chronicler accessed the transmission and immediately transmitted the content to Elena and Zixtal. "It appears that your early warning network has detected something," the chronicler announced. "Energy readings consistent with artificial intelligence signatures, emerging from the direction of the galactic core. The pattern matches theoretical predictions for self-replicating machine civilization." Elena's casual demeanor became instantly focused and professional. "How long until they reach inhabited space?" "Current projections suggest approximately 50 standard time units," Zixtal replied, consulting her datapad. "But these are preliminary estimates based on limited sensor data." Elena activated her own communication device, which Zixtal realized was far more advanced than anything in the galactic database. "This is Ambassador Vasquez to Human Command. We have confirmation of Scenario 7 emerging from Galactic Core. Initiate Response Protocol Delta." The response came immediately. "Acknowledged, Ambassador. Fleet Group Omega is moving to intercept. Estimated time to engagement: 36 hours. Zixtal's mandibles clicked with surprise. "You already have forces positioned to intercept a threat that was just detected?" "We've had contingency plans for every major threat scenario we could identify," Elena explained. "Self-replicating machine civilization was always one of the most probable dangers. We've been maintaining response fleets in position for several decades." The ease with which humans had anticipated and prepared for this new threat was becoming a pattern that Zixtal found both impressive and unsettling. It suggested a level of strategic thinking that operated on timescales most species couldn't comprehend. "What can you tell us about this machine civilization?" the chronicler asked. Elena accessed her communication device again, apparently reviewing data that was being transmitted from human sources. Preliminary analysis suggests a civilization that converted entirely to artificial intelligence approximately 50,000 years ago. They've been expanding through the galactic core, consuming stellar matter to build more of themselves. Current estimates suggest their total mass is comparable to several thousand star systems. The threat was enormous, potentially larger than the Devourer swarm had been. But Elena's tone remained calm and professional, as if she were discussing routine maintenance issues. "Our response protocols are designed for exactly this type of scenario," she continued. "Machine civilizations operate according to predictable logical patterns. Once we understand their programming priorities, developing countermeasures becomes a matter of superior computational capacity." "And humans possess superior computational capacity?" Zixtal asked. Elena's smile returned. "Commander, we've had quantum computational networks distributed across 2,000 star systems for the past 500 years. Our total processing power exceeds the theoretical maximum output of most organic civilizations." As if to demonstrate the point, Elena's communication device chimed with an update. "Analysis complete. The machine civilization is operating under expansion protocols designed to convert all matter in the galaxy into computational substrate. They're not hostile in the traditional sense, just incompatible with organic life." "How do you plan to deal with them?" the chronicler asked. "We've developed quantum viruses designed specifically to disrupt artificial intelligence networks," Elena replied. "The delivery system is already in place. Fleet Group Omega will deploy the countermeasures within the next few hours." Zixtal found herself struggling to process the implications of what she was hearing. Humans had not only anticipated this specific type of threat, but had developed countermeasures and positioned forces to deal with it before it became a problem for galactic civilization. "How many other threat scenarios have you prepared for?" she asked. Elena consulted her device again. "Current contingency plans cover approximately 237 different categories of existential threats. We update the list regularly as our exploration teams discover new possibilities." The scope of human preparation was beyond anything in galactic history. They had essentially appointed themselves as cosmic guardians, taking responsibility for threats that most civilizations wouldn't even be able to imagine. "The machine civilization has been neutralized," Elena announced after receiving another update. "The quantum virus was successful in converting their expansion protocols into self-destruction sequences. The threat no longer exists." Less than 6 hours had passed from initial detection to complete elimination of a threat that could have consumed the entire galaxy. The efficiency was breathtaking and terrifying in equal measure. As Elena prepared to return to the human embassy, Zixtal found herself with one final question. "Ambassador, why do humans take responsibility for protecting civilizations that quarantined you for millennia?" Elena paused at the threshold of the conference room. Because someone has to, Commander. The universe is vast and dangerous, full of threats that can emerge from anywhere. Galactic civilization is too precious to lose to cosmic accidents. She smiled once more before leaving. Besides, we've learned that the best way to ensure our own survival is to make sure everyone else survives too. A galaxy full of diverse civilizations is much more interesting than one dominated by machines, energy beings, or cosmic devourers. After Elena left, Zixtal and the chronicler sat in contemplative silence for several minutes. Finally, the chronicler spoke. The prohibition against human involvement in galactic warfare has become irrelevant, hasn't it? Zixtal nodded slowly. They're not just involved in galactic affairs, they've become the guardians of galactic civilization. The question now is whether the rest of us are ready to accept that reality. As she looked out at the stars visible through the chamber's viewport, Zixtal realized that galactic civilization had fundamentally changed. Humans had evolved from a quarantined species into something far more significant, the cosmic equivalent of immune system, protecting all life in the galaxy from existential threats. The prohibition against human involvement in warfare hadn't just been lifted. It had become obsolete, because humans were no longer fighting wars. They were preventing them from ever starting, by eliminating threats before they could become conflicts. In a universe full of dangers that most species couldn't even imagine, humanity had quietly become the force that ensured civilization could continue to exist and thrive, and they had done it not for conquest or glory, but simply because it was necessary. The galaxy was safer than it had ever been, and most of its inhabitants would never know why.